All right. Good evening, everyone. It's fantastic to see we've got a number of people joining us tonight. And I can see as well we've got more people joining as I talk now. So I'm sure by the end of the evening we're going to have quite a crowd here. Tonight's session is being recorded, so we will aim to get that recording out to you as soon as possible as well, particularly if there's anything we discussed tonight that we want to revise or have a look at in a bit more detail. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us tonight as well for our senior parent information evening. My name's Alex Harding, and I have the pleasure of being the head of Year 11 and Year 12 at Aspley High, and I am one of the people that will hopefully get the opportunity to work with yourself and your young person over the course of their senior schooling. So tonight, what we are going to do is provide you with an overview that is that world of senior schooling. And you will hear from myself and my colleague Alison Hopes, and we will talk to you about what senior looks like at Aspley High. We'll unpack that acronym QCE, which I'm sure you've heard before or seen in many of our emails that we send home. We'll talk to the MyQCE website. We'll unpack a track ed document, which is our important document that we use to track how our young people are travelling in senior in terms of their academics and their results. We'll talk about ARAs and what we can do to support young people if they fall sick, for example, when assessment occurs. And we'll also conclude the evening talking about study skills in our pastoral care program, which complements everything that we're going to be talking about tonight. So if throughout the evening you do have questions, we strongly encourage you to pop those in the chat. If for whatever reason you're having issues accessing the chat, we do have an email address up here on the screen, and we'll include that at the end as well. And we'll be checking that inbox throughout the evening. So we're happy to certainly field those questions as we go throughout the night, but we'll look at those, and then at the end, we'll do our best to answer those. And if there's any particular curly question or something really specific, you'll obviously be able to contact us directly, and we'll do whatever we can to help. So the first thing we're going to do tonight is have a look at some key terminology, because when we come into the senior school, as I said before, there's a lot of acronyms, a lot of new language that we need to become familiar with. When we talk about subjects in Year 11 and Year 12, we typically talk about general subjects, which are those subjects that students will study if they're looking at a university pathway. General subjects are the ones that have the external assessment that sit at the end of Year 12, and we'll speak to external assessment and how we can prepare for that a little bit later in the session. We also make reference to what's called applied subjects. These are subjects that typically lead towards more of a non-university pathway but have quite a practical nature. So when we talk about applied subjects, we've certainly got a number of students working in those, as we do subjects too, which are subjects that are typically studied through TAFE or registered training organisations. So we at Aspley High certainly have a very diverse cohort with students who excel in a range different general, applied and vet subjects. Okay, so if we move to our next slide here, given the diversity that we have within our cohort, you can see a range of different path options on this slide here. We aim for our students to be working towards their Queensland Certificate of Education, and my colleague Alison will speak to that a bit more as the evening goes on. So that's the QCE. That's a bit of a picture there of what that looks like. As I said before as well, we've got a significant proportion of our students who are looking to work towards their ATAR score. That's their tertiary entrance rank that they use to get into university. We were very pleased the other day to invite many of our graduates from last year who came back to our academic assembly, and we had some students last year who achieved some fantastic ATAR scores and are often, pursuing university as we speak. As I said before as well, we have a range of students who are looking at apprenticeships and traineeship opportunities, and we want to support those students through applied and vet pathways. And at Aspley High, we're proud that we have a large proportion of our students who do the TAFE at School program, where one day per week they're at a TAFE campus and they're working towards their qualification there. We also too have a range of students who are looking to attain employment upon graduation, and we have a range of support and measures kick in, particularly in Year 12, where we have a look at employment and post-school pathway opportunities for our students. So it's a very diverse group, and our job is to try and cater for our students and work with their strengths and weaknesses to get them to where they want to go. I'm now going to hand over to Alison Hopes, our Head of Department for Senior Schooling, who will take you through Queensland Certificate of Education and what we need to do to attain one of those.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight to hear more about senior schooling and some of those key moments that your student will work through year 11 and 12. So yes, the first thing that I will talk about is the QCE, Queensland Certificate of Education. The first important thing to know about this one is this is what we aim to have every single student exit with at the end of year 12. So this applies to every single one of our year 11 and 12s. And students start accumulating points fairly early in year 11 in relation to QCE. So you can see on the screen that there are a number of components to make a student eligible for a QCE. Those key ones are 20 QCE points, which are accumulated through completing units in subjects, both general and applied. VET certificates also have points, QCE points attributed to those, and that varies depending on the level of certificate that students are completing, from a certificate 1 through to a certificate 4, particularly are some of the certificates that students are doing at Aspley through external providers. Then there are some other recognised studies, but they're more individualised that we can certainly talk to individual students about. There is then that set pattern, which is 12 credits from completed core. Now, core comes from subjects that students have been in for all 4 units or completed certificates. So where that becomes perhaps a bit more of a tracking concern is only if students are doing a lot of subject changes. But obviously we hope to avoid that through good set planning and students being established early in their subjects. But I will certainly talk about that a little bit more in relation to subject changes later in this presentation. Then there is a set standard. So how do you accumulate those QCE points, which I'll talk about in a minute on the next slide. And then there is a literacy and numeracy component. So the important part with literacy and numeracy is in relation to literacy coming from passing a unit of an English subject. Now that can be essential English, English or literature that we offer here, or numeracy through passing a unit of mathematics, again, through any of the variety of mathematics courses. Now, there may actually be some of you here whose student is completed their numeracy perhaps at the back of year 10. There were some students who were in that group, but certainly I can clarify that if you are in that basket. So QCE, everybody, we hope to exit with that. 20 points, 12 from core, literacy and numeracy. And now I will talk about, well, how do you accumulate those points? Okay, so you can see here is an example of a selection of subjects that might be a student might be taking. And you can see that it's broken down into Unit 1, then Unit 2, and then Unit 3 and 4, which is a pair. So what happens in relation to accumulating those QCE points is that if a student receives a grade generally of a C or above, then that converts to a satisfactory result. And then for that satisfactory result in Unit 1 will mean that a student will bank 1 QCE point for each of those satisfactories. So in the example, you can see from the 6 subjects that 5 of those 6 were a C grade or above. Modern history was a D, which would have been an unsatisfactory. So for Unit 1, the example on the screen, the student banked 5 out of a possible 6 QCEs. Then come to Unit 2. You can see again the results for the student in relation to that A to E grade. They got modern history over the line this time. Unfortunately, biology jumped up to a D, but still they completed 5 out of their 6 subjects at a C grade or above for satisfactory, so they banked another 5 QCE points. So at the end of Unit 2, this student is sitting on 10 out of a possible 12 QCE points. This is when we then look at Unit 3 and 4 pair. So to obtain the 2 final QCE points in each subject, a student must pass the Unit 3-4 pair. That is 4 pieces of assessment in subjects and it's largely over the course of all of year 12. But I'll talk about some key junctures in a little bit for the transition of those units. So you bank a point for satisfactory unit 1, you bank a point for satisfactory unit 2, and then you bank the final 2 points in each subject from that 3-4 pair. So you can see again for this student that 3-4 pair in biology didn't get over the line, but passed the other 5 subjects for those 10. So this student in this example did get their 20 points. They didn't do any subject changes, so they met the core requirement for that as well. And you can also see that they passed, in fact, they passed all units of general English and general maths, so they hit the literacy and numeracy. But reality is for literacy and numeracy, you do only have to pass one of those units. But this student, in fact, passed all of them, which is obviously the ideal learning outcome for them. Talking about junctures of units. So most of you would be to semesters, semester 1, semester 2, terms in junior schooling. It does change a little bit when we come to senior schooling. In relation to where the junctures for units end. So rather than talking semesters, we talk more years across year 11 and 12, because that's what's important for timing for QCE and coming into external exams at the end of year 12 for general subjects. So the junctures are a little bit different in that area. Applied subjects, a lot of them do align with semesters, but some of them do align with also the general here. So you can see, for example, that in the general subjects in semester 1, students will actually start unit 2 of their subjects, and it's normally about halfway through term 2. I'll say that again. Students in general subjects will transition from unit 1 to unit 2 about halfway through term 2. So why is this important? I guess this is important particularly for those students who find that they are placed in subjects that they don't want to continue in for unit 2, 3, and 4. So they need to ensure that if they are looking at subject changes, that should be happening at the end of unit. And unit 1 really is the best spot to change that if you're going to. There's obviously complexities around changing subjects and not having done unit 1, etc., but I talk to that to individual students if that need arises. But it's important to know the transition from unit 1 to unit 2. It's also important to understand the transition from unit 2 to unit 3. So again, you can see that that happens during semester 2. Again, for most general subjects, that happens about halfway through term 4. Couple of reasons that's important. One, because that is the banking of the second QCE point. But also it's important because in your mathematics and science subjects, the 50% external exams at the end of year 12 are based on unit 3 and 4 knowledge. So when later on, when we're talking about study skills and the importance for students to have good study practices, good learning practices, and maintaining their understanding and retention of that knowledge, this is important because really what they're doing in their maths and science subjects at the end of this year will be included in an exam at the end of next year for year 12. Okay? And for those year 12 students and parents who are online now, that means that students should be revisiting also what they did at the end of last year to ensure that they have retained that as they progress through unit 3 and 4 together. Okay. And then obviously from a QCE point of view, that unit 3 and 4 are together for those final 2 QCE points. As I mentioned as well, applied subjects, a lot of them do more align with semesters, but some of them also do align with general subjects and their timeframes. So it's important to know, and students to have conversations with parents for those students online, that if you're thinking about changing subjects, when's the best time for you to be doing that? So that is QCE in a nutshell. Where you can find more information from QCAA in relation to that, they have a really great website that has a number of resources. So the My QCE website is a really good one for general information, but this is also a really good one that students have already gone into and will continue to go into over the next 2 years. So year 11s don't have a lot of information sitting there yet. Year 12s, though, do have information sitting in that student portal login. So one of the things that I would recommend parents do and students, you show your parents, is you're logging into that student portal area through My QCAA. What you will see in there is the subjects that you are enrolled in. So year 11s shortly, not yet. Year 12s, it will see the subjects that you are enrolled in or have been enrolled in and what your unit 1 and 2 results were for the subjects that you were enrolled in. What you should also see sitting in the student portal is any vet certificates that you have working towards or you have completed in there. So it's really the one-stop shop for students to see what information has been recorded at a school level to, one, check its accuracy, and two, so that you can do your own QCE tracking and know what you need to be doing. Also sitting in there is the academic integrity course, which students have done. So in the first couple of days, year 11 and 12 students did an academic integrity course that sits in there, which talks to them importantly about referencing, how to use appropriate academic integrity in their assessment, particularly the AI component that obviously students need to be aware of when submitting assessment at this stage, and how they appropriately reference or use AI if they do. Okay. Students should have a non-school email as part of their personal information in the student portal, because this QCAA access is important when they finish year 12 as well. This is where they will access to print off their Queensland Certificate of Education and their senior statement when they finish year 12. So we don't issue that as a school, QCAA do. And so they need to ensure that it's a non-school email that's registered there for them to access all of that information. It's also worth you going to the QCAA website, because under the senior secondary tab, it has all of the syllabus documents for every senior subject. It had that you can download and have a look at what you're going to be learning across all of those units, what the assessment's going to be. It also has under the assessment tab website sample assessments. So it's really good to have a look at what type of questions you might be getting and how those questions will be framed in that context for your assessment items. They also have annotated exemplars for you. So you can read through a sample exemplar response where it is broken down to demonstrate to you in that assessment how you meet those objectives for each syllabus and criteria. I've also already mentioned that external assessment at the end of year 12 for general subjects, and it will be here before you know it. I know I say it every year, but it does come around quickly, because remember that starts in about week 4 of term 4, year 12. So it is really a short term at the end of year 12. On that QCAA website, they also have external assessment where you can have a look at past external exam papers. You can have a look at past responses, lots of good information to dig down to in that QCAA website. And remembering that this is really important for your maths and science subjects, where it's unit 3 and 4 together, forming 50% of your result at the end of year 12. Okay. So highly recommend having a look at that QCAA website, sitting with student and logging into the My QCE student login and having a look at the learning that is already sitting there and the information already sitting there. I know that's a lot to take in, but it is on the website. Have a good look at it. And then if you have any other questions or clarification, my email will be back up at the end, and I'm happy for you to email me in relation to that. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is particularly in relation to those students who are ATAR eligible and are going for an ATAR. I'm really only going to provide a very short, succinct snapshot of what that means and what that looks like, because we will have mentoring interviews with students. And in fact, some of you might have already had conversations at home where your year 12 student has had an ATAR mentoring interview with Jaquita Miller, our principal, in the last week or so. So I'm only going to provide a little bit of a snapshot so that you're aware of the process. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have moving forward. So everybody gets a QCE. but only those students who are on an ATAR pathway, which is really if you're looking for a university pathway, will gain an ATAR. What makes you ATAR eligible? You might remember when we were looking at subject selection evening and other information nights that if you are doing 4 or more general subjects, you will automatically be eligible for an ATAR, because 4 general subjects and 1 applied can count in your ATAR calculation. Obviously, we have had meaningful conversations with students in their subject selections and pathways that if they're looking for a particular university, it's more recommended that they're in 5 or 6 general subjects and what those general subject combination might be. But if you're wondering, is my student going for an ATAR or are they ATAR eligible? The answer is in what subjects are they doing to make them eligible. Then how does the ATAR come about? So across that unit 3-4 pair that we talked about, there's 4 pieces of assessment. Across those 4 pieces of assessment, which includes the external exam in year 12, students get a raw result out of 100. That raw result out of 100 is what QCAA pass on to QTAC. QTAC are then the organisation that then take those raw results and they do subject scaling of those results. QTAC website is the place to go if you really want to dig down into how that's done and what that means in relation to scaling. But what it means is a raw result of 75 in 100 in physics and a raw result of 75 out of 100 in business may not mean the same in a scaled result at the end when it comes to adding that information to get an ATAR score. And that's what QTAC does. And there's lots of information on their website about that. So that's with the ATAR. The reason I flag it tonight is scaling can be important. And in fact, some parents online now have already received this information from me when their student has changed subjects. So scaling is important because, as I've mentioned, a 75 in physics won't scale the same as a 75 out of business. Where that matters is particularly those students who are going for a particular ATAR or need a particular subject if they're looking for a university pathway. So I've just got a couple of subjects as an example on the screen there where, for example, you can see from the 2022 scaling that a raw score of 69 in Earth Environmental Science, in fact, scaled to a 50.78, where in economics, a raw score of 65 out of 100 by a student scaled to a 71.12. So those 2 subjects are a good example of the impact that that scaling can have. So it's just important to remember that we're banking those raw results as students move through unit 3 and 4, particularly for internal assessment, is really, really important. And I would say that that is a really good opportunity, particularly for students in assignment type work, to bank as many points as they can, raw marks, because they have the advantage of submitting a draft, getting feedback and improving that to maximise their results. And that's when subject teachers can really provide some good information in that space. So that is, as I said, a quick snapshot of QCE and ATAR. How do you know how your student is going? So for year 12 parents, you would have already received a few track ed reports from me. Year 11 parents, you won't get one yet, but you certainly will at the end of unit 1 juncture, which will be about halfway through next term. So I touch on it tonight to 1, highlight that you keep an eye out for that and can expect it. And 2, this is probably where most questions from students and parents alike come from in relation to how their student is going. So I'm just going to show you that track ed information briefly tonight. There is a YouTube narration on our Aspley High website where there is more information and I go through this again. So you're welcome to have a look at that for clarification. Then, of course, reach out if you have any questions. So ensuring that students are on track for their QCE, we obviously track that very closely and we have early intervention conversations with students if they're looking at risk or if there's intervention that needs to happen in relation to maybe subject changes or how do they gain QCE points back. On the screen, and I know for some of you it might be a little bit small, but it gives you a good idea of the transition of a track ed report from grade 11 to grade 12. So the one on the left-hand side of the screen is a grade 11 student. So how do you know it's a grade 11 student? A couple of things. The top section of the report, of the track ed report, shows the reporting results. So you can see for this year 11 student that term 1, 2, and 4 data is in there. Term 3, we didn't issue report cards for year 11, so that's why there's no results in that top bit for term 3. You will also, on the right-hand side of that top section, see the latest behaviour and effort results from the term 4 report card. That is the A to the student D, hopefully never an E, result that staff have given students on the report card. So you can see a good year overview in that section. The important part for QCE tracking is the middle section of this report card particularly, because what you can see is there is a little S with a green box for Unit 1 and Unit 2, or there might be a little red U. So that red U indicates that this student in Unit 1, and it's actually general mathematics, lost a QCE point for not getting a satisfactory for Unit 2. So that's on the left-hand side. So as a year 11 student, they've got Unit 1 and Unit 2, and that's the points that they've banked thus far. Now, the important part for track ed and QCE tracking is because that student had a Unit 2 unsatisfactory at that juncture, track ed is gone, if that fullest and latest trend continues, then the student will only get 1 QCE point from general mathematics. However, that student has got an unsatisfactory. They've realised that they haven't worked to their potential, haven't sought as much feedback as they needed to, haven't attended homework clubs that we offer in the afternoon, haven't done their study strategy skills. So they actually turn that around for Unit 3 and 4. They can still get their 3 out of 4 points because they'll get the 2 for the Unit 3-4 power. You can see that they're on track for all the other subjects, so it's predicted that they will retain their 4 QCE points. Obviously, if things go pear-shaped, that may change, but that's how we track and predict at those important junctures how students are going. On that year 11 report sitting to the side there, you will then see individual assessment results in all of their subjects. And for general subjects, you will see their percentages that they sit on as well. And this formulates really good mentoring discussions with students as well as to which one of those tasks are they stronger in, and maybe there's some exams that they're not as strong in, and what can we be doing to have those students better perform in exams and get those strategies right for them. The bottom section is if there is any TAFE or VET or external courses that a student is doing. So in this example, there is a Cert 2 in tourism that this student is doing. They're estimated to get 4 QCE points from that. So that is then calculated on that right-hand side. So at this stage, this student is estimated to get 21 QCE points, which is obviously over the 20 threshold. Our hope, though, however, is that they would turn around Unit 3-4 in general mathematics, pass everything in year 12, and they would actually exit with 23. Okay. That then builds on the right-hand side with year 12. So same information or similar information, but it's just more detailed. So again, at the top section, you will see that they've now got their Term 1 and Term 2 report card for year 12 added in at the top there. Still got their A to E reporting results from teachers. The middle section, so you'll see they've still got their Unit 1 and Unit 2 information, but what you can see on that right-hand side is, again, the running total and results for their assessment items. So which assessment items they've completed and what their result has been for those items. So this snapshot is actually for a student who fully completed up to external exams, which is that final result, and you can see what percentages they were on. So again, that's a really important juncture as they move through year 12 of what raw score are they tracking for at this stage and what do they need to do to hit those marks that they would like for the ATAR score for university. Again, down the bottom section is your any VET or tracking information that's there. In both of these examples, you'll also see that the literacy and numeracy right down the bottom right-hand corner is green, the lit and the num, literacy and numeracy, because both of these students passed a unit of English and mathematics, so they are green light in there, which means they've met that requirement of the QCE as well. I know that's a lot of information to take in a very short space of time, but as I mentioned, there is a YouTube video on our school website that takes you through that in more detail. That's really helpful to rewatch in your own time and space. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions as you start to get track ed reports to clarify anything that you're still unsure about. Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand back to Alex, who's going to talk about some of the pastoral care and other study strategies for Year 12.
Thanks, Alison. Hi, everyone again. As we move through here, what we want to do now is talk about, I suppose, processes we have at the schools really complement and support our students with that learning process. We want to do what we can here at Aspley to help our students, on those track ed profiles have as many green squares as possible. So we have a pastoral care program that runs at this school. It takes place on a Monday and a Thursday. And what that looks like depends on the timing. Sometimes we will have whole school assemblies where we certainly speak to study skills and effective classroom strategies. We have year level assemblies. We have senior school assemblies with year 10, 11 and 12. And we also run a range of classroom workshops with our students with their pastoral care teacher. So our pastoral care program engages a wide variety of different stakeholders because, as I said at the outset of this video, we have a diverse range of students in our school. So we focus in senior on obviously study skills, and I'll talk to some of those shortly. Elevate Education, our external providers we get into sessions, the learning scientists. We have a study skills booklet based off that program. We focus on a variety of different universities and TAFE and registered training organisations who come and speak to our young people. There's a strong focus on resiliency, mental health and growth mindset in our senior pastoral care program. We also address topics relating to wellbeing, and there's a range of different resources here, and we've sent this information out in a letter, so everyone should have a bit of an idea about what we do in pastoral care. Specifically, focusing on study skills, this is a diagram that I like to talk to the students about. In Year 12s, if you're listening tonight, you'll be seeing this again on our Thursday assembly we've got this week. So Alison was talking before about the fact that one of the, I suppose, key features of this QCE system is that some students are required to retain knowledge that they're taught in November, the year before they sit the external exams the year after in later in the year. So there's often content that students need to retain and understand for well over 12 months. So we want our students to have a suite of strategies that they can use to help shift that forgetting curve and help increase retention in their study and their knowledge. So every student has a copy of a study skills booklet that's derived from the learning scientists. And there are a suite of workshops that are currently being undertaken or will soon be undertaken in pastoral care and on year level assemblies where we're going to unpack some of these skills in a fair bit of detail. And I know certainly speaking to our principal, Jaquita Miller, in those academic mentoring interviews that are taking place at the moment, a lot of conversation is shifting to these strategies here when talking to our young people about what it is that they're doing to help study effectively for their exams. And we want to try and, certainly move away from just looking at notes and enacting some really proactive strategies to assist with that process. Following on from this presentation, tomorrow you'll receive an email, hopefully with the YouTube link. And additionally to what I'll do is I'll include electronic access to all of these study strategies so you can have a look at these with your young person as well. One of the key study strategies that we talk about a lot at Aspley High is this idea of space practice. And space practice is the concept of spacing out your study and trying to avoid what's called cramming. And I know, many people in the room here have certainly sat assessment before, and I'm sure we've all been in that situation where we've crammed the night before and it's been quite a stressful experience. So one of the workshops we run with our students is setting out their planners so they can undertake space practice. And that's that concept of setting time aside in our busy days and our busy schedules to really focus on the key points that were discussed in our lessons. And what that means is looking at a variety of different subjects over a period of time. So when we lead into that assessment, we're avoiding cramming all that information the night before. Another key study strategy that we talk about regularly is a retrieval practice. And this is a very simple 5-minute activity that students can undertake on a weekly basis for pretty much every subject they do here at Aspley High. The way a retrieval practice works is you take a blank piece of paper or open a blank Word document, and you simply do a brain dump of key information that you can remember from the subject. And you do that again over a period of time. And over time, when you do that, you find that your ability to recall information and the quantity of information that you can recall should be increasing. And this activity is quite powerful because if you do a retrieval practice and you're writing down topics and information and you're highlighting it going, I've got no idea what that actually means, that should trigger a conversation with the teacher of that subject. And it's a great opportunity there for some intervention to take place. So these are two of our key strategies that we regularly talk about with our seniors, and will continue to do so. Another really important resource to highlight at Aspley High is Education Perfect. So Education Perfect is an online resource that includes a wealth of information to complement the teaching in the classroom, and also a range of formative assessment techniques as well. And when I talk about formative assessment, what I mean there is practice quizzes and activities that you can undertake to help you prepare for the summative assessment. And Alison was talking about the summative assessment before, which is where you undertake assessment that accrues a score out of 100 in a general subject. So formative assessment is really important at Aspley, and doing a retrieval practice is an example of formative assessment, but Education Perfect offers an even more in-depth approach. So we certainly encourage our students to be accessing those resources there, because when we talk to our students who have done well and have achieved high ATAR scores, they've certainly been engaging in a variety of those practices that we've spoken about tonight. So there's a bit of a snapshot, I suppose, about the study skills that we teach at Aspley High, and the resources available for our students. And I recognise that when it comes to studying, there's no one size fits all approach, but we want our students to certainly be aware of the different strategies that are out there, and certainly, I suppose, look beyond just looking at notes and having some proactive strategies they can implement, hence these ones we've discussed here. Okay. So I'm now going to hand back to Alison, who's going to talk a little bit now about submission of assessment, ARAs, and some further support services in the school.
Great. Thank you, Alex. While I've got a captive audience, I thought it was timely to talk about the ARA process. There are some of you, and we hope a vast majority of you, may never need to take advantage of the illness and misadventure ARA component for sure. But I think it's important, as I said, to be aware that it exists, and it's quite different in senior schooling than it is in the junior schooling. So when it comes to submission dates for assessment in year 11 and 12, the due date is the due date, and there's only very special circumstances under which that can be moved, and that has to be done through an application process. The reason being is it's QCAA that really regulates that ARA process when it comes to senior schooling, and the conditions that must be met to create an equal playing field for all students in relation to assessment. Now, I am aware that there will be some people on the chat whose students have long-term ARAs. So they are students who have worked with guidance, or perhaps Mr. Houghton, in relation to having long-term ARAs. I'm particularly, though, talking about students who are looking for the illness and misadventure component. So this is where perhaps on the weekend, heaven forbid, you were playing sport and you've tripped and broken your arm, and you've got an exam on the Monday, but you might need to use a computer, or maybe you're still in pain and you can't turn up. So it's those sort of applications particularly that must be applied for electronically, because as I said, the due date is due date, except when we have an ARA application submitted and that's reviewed by admin and approval can be given. So what happens if that applies to you? So in iCentre, which is through the intranet that students can access, in the Senior Hub Resources area, and there's a little snapshot of that on the screen, there is an electronic form for students to complete for that application. There is then a generic email that they send that application to with any evidence as to why they need that extension. So in most cases, that will obviously be a medical certificate or the like. In a lot of cases for illness and misadventure, that's easy. You just fill in the form, attach the medical certificate, and send it off. However, we acknowledge that sometimes other issues arise, and it's important to know that this process exists and the support people that we have here at Aspley that can help. I'm obviously happy for you to reach out to me in the first instance, and I can redirect you if necessary. And that redirection might be some of our support services here at school that will then follow up with you and the student as needed to get those ARA applications and those extensions or adjusted due dates done. So just to be aware that QCAA regulate what needs to be done in relation to ARA applications. We then help streamline that process through the online application form that gives you information about what to do, what to attach, and where to send that. And then it will be conversations with students, teachers, parents, and maybe other support workers to then adjust those due dates or maybe the way that a student completes assessment as needed. So, for example, with a broken arm, it might be, well, I can still do the exam, but I will need to use a computer. So there's lots of things that we can adjust and discuss, and it is a very case-by-case basis. Again, if you have any questions, I'm happy for you to reach out to me in the first instance, and then I can obviously redirect you to the right person if necessary for more of those longer-term adjustments and requirements that might be in place. I also know some of you will have liaised with Aspley Lundberg in relation to provision of some of those extra conditions that you will need, and it formed part of your set planning discussions. Also in relation to exam phases, so students will be sent out specific timelines in relation to when exams are taking place. So in year 11 and 12 for those internal exams, students are here at school as normal in their class, and then they just come out to complete those assessment items when they fall during those days. Still maximising learning, maximising their strategies in class, coming out to complete those pieces of assessment when they are due. So I do know that there was going to be exam phase information come out fairly shortly, particularly for the year 12s with their first pieces of assessment in the next couple of weeks. So it's certainly something to be discussing with your students in relation to those timetables that do come out. And as I mentioned already, lots of support services that we can direct you to if needed. So don't be afraid to reach out for clarification. And that is it, me, ARA. So we've really come to the end of the information that we want to give you. If you have specific questions about subjects and how your student's going, obviously your subject teachers and or the curriculum head of department should be your first point of contact. The Deputy Principal, Mr. Michael Sparks, can help you as well in relation to more of those bigger picture things that we've talked about today, and particularly in the ARA exam phase space. He is your go-to for that information. And then Alex and I, obviously, in relation to any other questions in the senior schooling. And we are a team that works and liaises together. So if we're not the one answering your question, then somebody definitely will in that senior space to help you with that. Again, my email is on the screen, just in case your chat functionality isn't working. And we will hang around for a little bit in case anyone has some questions that they would like to propose in the chat window or sent by email if needed.
Alrighty, everyone. I can see people, rightly so, are very busy and heading off. Thank you for the very kind words that are coming through. We hope tonight has been informative. We know there's been a lot of information covered. We will aim to get the recording out to you ASAP. Like Alison said, we're only an email or a phone call away. If we can be of any help whatsoever, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And again, I thank you for coming along tonight. Thanks, everyone.